Summer camp
Yeah.
slashers and like deep emotional healing. You wouldn't think those two things go together.
Right.
But that's kind of what we're looking at today, right? We're
Right.
talking Adrienne King,
Uh-huh.
original final girl Alice from Friday the 13th,
Yes.
and her interview on the Horror Heals
I
podcast.
love that podcast.
It's so good.
So good.
So get ready to go down the rabbit hole because we're going to unpack how a genre known for like scaring the heck out of us
Yeah.
can actually be a source of strength and support.
It's wild. And what's so fascinating to me is how Adrienne's personal story is so intertwined with this whole horror as healing thing.
Right.
Because she lived through a terrifying stalker ordeal.
Ugh.
And to make matters worse, this was the early 80s,
Oh, no.
when stalking wasn't taken as seriously as it is now.
I can't imagine going through that and like with so little support. Did she talk about how that time period, that lack of understanding, like impacted her?
She did, and it's almost like her character's vulnerability in the film, combined with the real-life terror that she was facing off-screen,
Right.
it created this, like, perfect storm of trauma.
Oh, wow.
So it's no wonder that she stepped away from the public eye for a while.
Yeah. It makes you think about how we often separate movies from reality.
Totally.
But for her, those lines must have felt so blurred.
Absolutely.
Okay, but she did eventually return to the horror scene, right? Attending a convention after all those years.
I did.
Was that a difficult decision for her?
It sounds like it was a huge step. I mean, she had spent years processing this trauma, seeking solace in voiceover work, avoiding the spotlight. You might think that returning to the world of Friday the 13th, a world so closely tied to her own trauma, would be like the last thing she'd want to do.
So what happened? What was it like for her to walk back into that world?
So picture this. Adrienne walks into this horror convention expecting, well, we don't know what she's expecting.
Right.
But what she finds is remarkable.
Okay.
Fans, especially these big tattooed guys, you might stereotype as intimidating,
Yeah.
were overcome with emotion. They were thanking her for Alice's strength, for how her character, her survival, had helped them through their own tough times.
Wow, I'm getting chills just hearing you describe it. It's like this incredible role reversal. The final girl, often seen as a victim, becomes this beacon of strength for these fans. What is it about horror, about these stories of survival, of facing our fears, that creates such a powerful sense of connection?
It's like horror fans have this shared language,
Uh-huh.
a way of understanding the darkness that exists both in the world and within ourselves. And many of them have experienced their own traumas, felt that same vulnerability, that same isolation that Adrienne went through. And within the horror community, those experiences aren't judged. They're understood.
It's like finding your tribe,
Yeah.
a place where vulnerability is met with empathy, not judgment.
Ex-
So these horror conventions become more than just gatherings for fans to like geek out over their favorite films. They become these incredible spaces for healing and support. And Adrienne actually uses this term, right?
Yeah.
The idea of shared trauma, like that's a real thing.
Absolutely. It's not just a buzzword. Shared trauma occurs when a group of people, go through a harrowing experience together, like a natural disaster or war. But it can also happen on a more individual level through shared experiences of illness or grief, or even, as we're seeing here, connecting with stories that reflect our deepest fears and vulnerabilities.
So you're telling me that watching a scary movie with friends could potentially be a bonding experience? Sign me up.
Right.
Just
Right.
kidding, kinda. But seriously, how does that like actually play out in the context of the horror community?
Well, think about it this way. When we watch a horror movie, especially one that resonates with us on a personal level, we're tapping into those primal fears, those fight or flight responses that are hardwired into us. We're confronting those fears in a safe, controlled environment, and that can be incredibly cathartic.
It's like facing your fears, but without the real life consequences.
Exactly. And when you're surrounded by other people who understand those fears, who have maybe even experienced similar things in their own lives, it creates this incredible sense of validation, of camaraderie. It's like saying, you're not alone in this, I get it.
Which is what Adrienne experienced at that convention. It wasn't just one fan, it was a whole community embracing her, sharing their stories, and finding solace in her strength. She even shared that incredible story about the female soldier, right? The one serving overseas, who found comfort in Alice's story during a terrifying experience. I mean, it still blows my mind how a fictional character from a slasher film could have that kind of impact.
It's a powerful testament to how stories, even those in the horror genre, can provide a framework for processing our own experiences. When we see someone, even a fictional character, overcome obstacles and survive, it can give us hope. It reminds us that we're not alone in our struggles.
And she said that this soldier told her that Alice saved her life. I mean, that's heavy stuff. It makes you think about how impactful Adrienne's decision to return to the horror scene was. Like, not just for her own healing, but for all those fans who connected with her story and with Alice's journey. And speaking of healing, I know we wanted to talk about Adrienne's art. How does that fit into this whole conversation about horror and healing?
This is where it gets really interesting. You see, during her stalking ordeal, Adrienne turned to art as a form of therapy. She talks about how painting became an outlet for her, a way to process those complex emotions that were swirling around inside her.
So it wasn't just about escaping into horror movies or connecting with fans. It was about channeling those experiences into something tangible, something beautiful. What kind of art does she create?
She's incredibly talented. She actually painted a piece called Stalking on 82nd Street that directly addresses her experience with her stalker.
Wow. I'm floored. To turn something so dark and terrifying into art, it's like she's reclaiming that experience, taking back control.
That's the beauty of creative expression, especially for those who have experienced trauma. It allows you to explore your emotions, to make sense of your experiences, and to find a path towards healing.
And she didn't just keep her art to herself. She found a way to share it with her fans through a line of Crystal Lake wines.
Oh, wow.
With her paintings featured on the labels, no less.
How cool.
What a cool way to merge her passion for art with the world of Friday the 13th, though I heard she's put that on hold recently.
She did. And that decision speaks volumes about the healing power of this whole journey. You see, because of the support of the horror community, the connection she's found with fans who appreciate her vulnerability and her strength, Adrienne finally feels free to pursue her art full-time.
It's like this full circle moment. The horror genre, which brought her both trauma and unexpected solace, has ultimately given her the platform and the confidence to embrace her true passion.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's kind of amazing how this conversation has gone from like summer camp slashers to finding your tribe in unexpected places to the therapeutic power of art.
It really is. And what's particularly interesting to me is how this all connects back to the future of the Friday the 13th franchise.
Right.
Adrienne mentions, there's a new series in development called Crystal Lake.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so here's where it gets really meta.
Yeah. Knowing Adrienne's story, knowing how deeply fans connect with these films, with these characters, it makes you wonder, could Adrienne's experience, her advocacy for both the fans and the legacy of these films, actually influence how studios approach these projects moving forward?
I think so.
Yeah.
Because we're seeing a shift in the industry toward more authentic storytelling, particularly when it comes to portraying trauma and healing. And horror fans, I think maybe more than any other fan base, crave those raw, relatable narratives. So to think that Adrienne King, the original Final Girl, could be at the forefront of this movement toward more empathetic, fan-centric storytelling, it's pretty incredible.
It's like horror, this genre that's so often dismissed as gratuitous violence or cheap thrills, is actually paving the way for more meaningful, more impactful storytelling. Who knew? Well, I guess we did after this deep dive. From stalking nightmares to convention embraces to finding solace and strength through art and community, Adrienne King's story is a testament to the human capacity for resilience and the power of finding connection in the most unexpected places. And I think if this deep dive has taught us anything, it's that sometimes facing our fears, even through the lens of a horror film, can be the first step toward healing and finding our own tribe.